Stella Tennant, one of fashion's most striking faces of the 1990s. She was a statuesque beauty who commanded the runways of the world's most celebrated designers. But how did one of fashion's brightest lights dim so suddenly? On September 26, 2020, news broke that Stella Tennant had been found unresponsive in her home near the Scottish village of Aboyne. Her cause of death, a tragic accident. This is the story of Stella Tennant. Before we start, if you enjoy stories like this and learning more about the people who shape our world, please subscribe. It really helps me out. Thank you. So who was Stella Tennant? Why does her death matter? And why are we telling her story? Born in 1969 in a small town called Douglas in Scotland, Tennant came from aristocratic roots. Her grandfather was the 7th Duke of Devonshire, whose family were prominent figures in British high society. But unlike many of her peers in the upper echelons of society, Stella didn't have any interest in the usual things: boys, parties, fancy dinners. Instead, she preferred to stay home and draw. By all accounts, Stella was an odd child, but not in the way that most people think of odd. She wasn't popular in school, but that was more because she didn't want to be than because of any fault of her own. As one friend put it, she just didn't fit into a social scene. With her pale skin, shock of white blonde hair, and startling blue eyes, she looked otherworldly. In fact, when she was growing up, people in her hometown used to call her Snow White. When she was 13, Stella's mother, Lady Emma Cavendish, bought her first Polaroid camera, which ignited a passion in Stella for photography. Throughout her teens, she took thousands of self-portraits and Polaroids of her friends on the sprawling estate where she grew up. Little did she know that these pictures would play a crucial role in launching her modeling career. Although she grew up on a large estate with plenty of money, Stella's upbringing was far from privileged. She had 4 younger siblings, and her parents were strict with all of them. They ran their household like a farm, insisting that their children get up early, tend the animals, and help with the crops. Although Stella found solace in art, she had no interest in modeling or entering the fashion industry. After graduating from high school, she studied sculpture at Winchester School of Art, seemingly taking the opposite path from what would have been expected of someone with her background. In fact, it was by pure chance that Stella became a model at all. You see, at the time, Stella was sending her Polaroids to various magazines and catalogs, but without much success. Then one day in 1993, British Vogue put out a casting call for new faces, and on a whim, Stella decided to send in some of her Polaroids. The next thing she knew, she was contacted by the editor and asked to come into the office. When she arrived, they showed her some photos of Naomi Campbell and Linda Evangelista and said that they wanted her to look like them. Although initially resistant to the idea, Stella eventually agreed to give it a try. At the time, she was living with her boyfriend and fellow art student, designer and DJ Paul Wilson, in a squat near Winchester. So when she got the call from Vogue, she went straight to the shops to buy herself a pair of black jeans, a white t-shirt, and a slip dress, then headed to London to meet with the photographer Stephen Meisel, who was responsible for shooting that month's Vogue Italia cover. The shoot ended up being Stella's big break. When the glossy pages of Vogue hit newsstands that October, the fashion world sat up and took notice. There was something different about this girl with the androgynous elfin looks, the mismatched ensembles, the carefree confidence. She didn't look like any of the models that the public was used to seeing at the time. At the age of 24, Stella instantly became one of the most recognizable faces in fashion. And although she looked like a natural, it was actually quite the opposite. In fact, she hated posing for photos and got extremely nervous around cameras. Despite this, she quickly became a favorite among photographers, including the notoriously demanding Stephen Meisel, who saw something special in her. But who exactly was this new face? In the years since her passing, many have described Stella as shy, humble, and sweet. Those who knew her also noted her quirky sense of humor and love for practical jokes. One former colleague recalled, "She loved the fact that she could make people laugh. She thought it disarmed people." In fact, her sense of humor often caught people off guard because normally you wouldn't associate someone with that kind of wacky sense of humor with such a serious, almost stony-faced demeanor on the runway. After making jaws drop in Vogue Italia, Stella went on to dominate the catwalks of Milan and Paris. During the 1990s, she was a fixture at Chanel, Versace, Alexander McQueen, Yves Saint Laurent, and countless others. She walked for everyone from Jill Sander to Miu Miu. She was literally everywhere. In particular, Stella had a close relationship with Chanel and its creative director, Karl Lagerfeld. At the time, the French fashion house was looking to revamp its image and appeal to a younger demographic, and Stella was perfect for the job. Lagerfeld once said of Stella, "She is absolutely my idea of a modern-day Surlimer, a little bit cowgirl, a little bit punk rock. She is very chic, but not too sexy. Very cool, but not too sophisticated. Just right." Under his direction, Stella became the face of Chanel for over a decade, appearing in countless ads, lookbooks, and on the runway. Their partnership helped propel the brand into the 21st century and cemented Stella's status as a true icon. One anecdote about Stella and Karl's relationship comes from Eric Frunder, Lagerfeld's longtime publicist and friend, who shared an amusing story about a pair backstage at a Chanel show. He recalls, "It must have been in the late 1990s. Lagerfeld told me that he was going to dress Stella as Coco Chanel and do a kind of variation on a theme. I turned to him and said, 'But Karl, Stella is not a looker. She's not beautiful in the conventional way. She doesn't look like Coco Chanel.' He turned back to me, looked me straight in the eye and said, 'Exactly.'" Beyond Chanel, Stella was also the face of Burberry, Prada, Calvin Klein, Yves Saint Laurent, Valentino, and many others. She appeared in hundreds of magazine covers and was featured in countless TV shows, including Friends. Thanks to her effortless, cool, and ageless beauty, Stella became the epitome of 1990s style and helped define the era's penchant for minimalism, androgyny, and youthful rebellion. But behind the bright lights and flashing cameras, Stella was anything but glamorous. Although she traveled the world and met countless celebrities, she still felt like the awkward teenager from Scotland. In fact, she much preferred staying home and out of the limelight. Back in Scotland, she spent her time raising her 3 children and taking care of her sheep and chickens. Despite her humble personality, Stella couldn't escape the pressures of the fashion world. As she rose through the ranks, she started feeling fatigued by the constant travel, tight deadlines, and long hours away from her kids. Additionally, with her naturally thin frame, she struggled to maintain the weight requirements of the industry. According to her agent, she was once told by a fashion executive that she needed to lose a few pounds. Stella responded by going on a hunger strike for 3 weeks. In 2005, Stella made headlines when she was involved in a legal row with Burberry over payment for using her image in advertisements. Although she had modeled for the brand many times before, this time she refused to work unless they paid her like a celebrity rather than a model. This was a huge deal because it was one of the first times that a top model publicly challenged a brand and demanded better treatment. Ultimately, the dispute was settled out of court and Stella continued to work with Burberry on and off throughout her career. As the early 2000s rolled on, Stella started taking longer breaks between jobs, opting instead to spend more time with her kids and focus on her personal life. She even admitted in an interview that she wasn't particularly fond of the modeling industry at the time. She said, "I don't really like it. It's superficial, and lots of people are getting into it for the wrong reasons. It's become a business rather than an art form." Instead of following the lead of other models in creating her own brand, Stella seemed to go out of her way to avoid the spotlight. Although she made a few appearances here and there, she largely stayed out of the public eye for several years. However, in the 2010s, Stella made a triumphant return to the runway. She graced the catwalks of Chanel, Valentino, Louis Vuitton, and Dior once again, proving that she was still relevant and in demand. Although she had largely stayed out of the spotlight, the fashion industry had clearly missed her and were happy to welcome her back with open arms. In fact, her comeback seemed to surprise Stella as much as anyone else. She said, "I don't know why they want me now. I'm older and I have gray hair." But perhaps that was exactly why she was back. Stella represented something different from the cookie-cutter models that dominated the industry. She was authentic, unique, and refreshingly honest. Sadly, Stella passed away in 2020 at the age of 52. Although her time in the spotlight was relatively short, her impact on the fashion world was immeasurable. She paved the way for a new generation of models with her offbeat charm and androgynous elegance. And she showed that it's possible to succeed in a cutthroat industry while remaining true to yourself. Stella Tennant may be gone, but her legacy will live on forever. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you want to learn more about famous people, check out the series in the description below, and make sure to subscribe. It really helps me out. Thanks again, and see you next time.